Hey everyone, good afternoon or good evening. I guess it just depends on where you're coming from. Welcome and thanks for joining us. We have a really fantastic panel put together for those of you that are joining. And I took a look at some of the list of people that are joining us, and I think there are a couple people coming for different reasons, I should say. One is some of you might be joining because you're a business owner or a business leader, and you're trying to look at what this whole business operating system is all about, or what is business coaching and what's it all about. And you saw some of these individuals or the systems they represent as options that you wanted to explore. So consider this almost like speed dating for operating systems. You have the opportunity to really get an understanding of what these systems have to offer you. I looked at some of you also that had signed up. You may be listening or watching because you might actually be a business advisor, a coach, a consultant, or you might be in a space where you're working directly with these business owners or business leaders themselves. And you might even be trying to size up, are any of these systems systems or approaches that you would want to represent or be part of as well? Or might you refer some of them into your clients? Whatever the reason you're listening or watching, we're hoping we can answer any of the questions that you have along the way. So quick housekeeping, if you have questions, please type them in the chat. The question that you're thinking is likely something that someone else is thinking. So please type it in the chat. We have Jordan here and Mark here. My name is Eric. We're all with Journey Alliance. Our goal is really just to facilitate this conversation for you. So if you have a question, type it in the chat. And Jordan's going to go ahead and try to move through those and move them on screen so we can try to get your questions answered as we go. But let me go ahead and jump right in. I'm going to give each person that's here on the panel an opportunity just to introduce themselves. I'm going to go ahead and Rebecca, I'll start with you. Kate, I'm going to go to you after that. Benj, I'm going to go to you. Bill, I'll go to you after that because you're all on my screen from that direction. But just let us know who you are and what system you're representing, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. I'm Rebecca Finken. I am a certified EOS implementer. EOS stands for the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And I work with entrepreneurs and their leadership teams to help them get more of what they want from their businesses. And I've been an entrepreneur for 30 years. So I've got a bit of experience in the ups and downs of the whole experience of being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that intro, Rebecca. Bill, how about you?
So my name is Bill Gallagher. I'm a scaling coach and part of the whole Scaling Up group. I'm one of the senior scaling coaches, and I work very closely with Vern Harnish, the creator of the whole Scaling Up framework and the Rockefeller habits that you might also know that came before it. I help companies grow, either achieve growth or sustain growth. And I particularly focus on companies that they want to get to 100 million or a billion. They want to be number one in the world. They want to go nationwide. They've got big growth goals.
Yeah, Bill, thanks for that. And yeah, Mastering Rockefeller Habits, personal for me, it was the first book I ever read about operating systems 10, 15 years ago, whatever it might have been. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Kate, how about you?
Oh, hello, everyone. My name is Kate Ripp, and I am representing the 7 stages of growth. My company is Mission Critical Teams, and what we primarily do is help growing businesses navigate the challenges of that growth. So typically, when clients hire me, they want me to help them identify, anticipate, and navigate those predictable challenges that every growing company goes through in the areas of operations and strategy and leadership. So they learn to reframe the problems and step back, look to the horizon, see around the corner, so to speak.
Thanks a lot, Kate. And Benj, how about you?
Yeah, thanks for the inviting the new kid on the block to the party. I'm representing System and Soul. I'm the CEO. We, as the name suggests, the soul, we get really into the weeds with the people in the business. Not just how do we use them for the business, but how do we empower them in a way that they're actually thriving and getting a sense of dignity from the business that then is reciprocated through the work that they do. A lot of focus on the culture, leadership development side. But you've got to have the blocking and tackling at the base to make all that work. So glad to be here. Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. So if anybody's listening or watching, you're just jumping in, please, if you have questions as we go, type them in the chat. You may already be familiar with some of these systems. You may already be familiar with whether it be business coaching or operating systems, but you may not be. So feel free to ask questions, type them in the chat, and we'll go ahead and move them to the panel participants as we go. Part of our goal today is to make sure that those of you that join can get your questions answered and be more informed. The other part of our goal, though, is as we're recording this, is to create the ability for people to look back and get some of those questions answered that maybe you had, but hopefully somebody else asked on your behalf. I'm going to go ahead and jump in with our first question. You're on my screen, so I'm going to ask you the first question right now. What I'll end up doing is I'll ask this question for maybe one of you, maybe two of you, and then sometimes I'll ask all of you the question because I think it's good for everybody to hear the different perspectives. And the same will be true of people as they join and ask questions. I'll go ahead and move that question around if it makes sense. Ben, you see it there, or Ben, you see it there. What is the core philosophy or approach of the organization that you're representing? So what's the core philosophy of System and Soul?
Man, we're going deep quick. That's a great question. My coach that I've had for 16 years says that every business problem is a reflection of the heart of the leader, which really sucks to hear if you're the leader. But there's some truth in it, and I've been there, and I've been that. And when we work with organizations, it's very much centered around our leadership philosophy. And our leadership philosophy is that the majority of the impact that you'll make as a leader comes from who you are when you show up. Your ability to be inwardly sound and show up for the sake of other people, not showing up with your backpack of baggage and you need for validation and ego and all of those things. So when we can start to remove that from the room and we get wholehearted leaders to show up, then everything else becomes really frictionless to solve in a unified effort in the business. So it's, all the business problems are solved with people. And so we really spend a lot of time in the people.
Yeah, so it sounds like that from a core philosophy standpoint, it's not just focused around the system or the process, but from what you're saying, it's the heart of the leader and it's the people.
Yeah, I think in the work we do, yes, in how a client company interacts with us and experiences us, I would say that the flexibility to meet them where they are with whatever problem they have, with whatever stage of the business they're in, has been a huge attribute for us.
Okay, I appreciate you sharing that. Bill, same question for you.
So thanks. I would say that ours is a growth framework. So we're particularly focused on growth, and it's a framework, not a system. It's an open, living, best of framework of the latest and best ideas today, which isn't to say it'll be the same thing tomorrow. So we recommend something and we have one way of doing it, and then we learn a new way of doing it, or we hear from some other thought leaders. So we're continually curating and bringing in new ideas and new thought leaders as thing evolves. As work goes to flexible hybrid situations, as AI comes in, it's not like a baked in stone 10 years ago kind of a thing. Although it was created some years ago, now tested on thousands of people, we continue to evolve it with the latest thought leaders in the world of business growth.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you even just reframing that, even for me, that scaling up is a framework. And it sounds like it's open-ended, whereas the market speaks and there are different things that become available, you have the ability to adjust and add those as best practices within the framework.
Yeah, it's also kind of, we have about 300 practitioners around the world working with teams, and they all kind of work in different ways. So some people have very specific language and things like that. We all say good morning in different ways. Somebody says Ohio gozaimasu, somebody says bon dia, buenos dias, guten morgen, right? They all kind of mean the same thing. So we don't have to do it the same way. We can achieve the same ideas that are fundamental, but make them unique to each company that we work with.
Yeah, no, good analogy. I appreciate that. Rebecca, same question for you, just to get an understanding of the philosophy or approach of EOS.
Sure. So we are an operating system, and our core philosophy focuses on the 6 key components, which are in any business, right? There's the vision, the people, the data, process, issues, and then traction, which is how you get where you want to be. And we use a simple set of real world practical tools. It's not hard. There's a lot of work involved in implementing the system. However, it's simple, which is why I love it. And it's a holistic approach. So it just addresses the aspects of business management, creating cohesive teams rather than just isolated improvements. We're results oriented. And then we create leadership team alignment throughout the whole organization. So everyone's rowing in the same direction, knowing where they're going, how they're going to get there. It's very scalable. So if you're looking to scale for, M&A, other transactions, this helps because you're organized, you know where you are, you know where you're going. And it does create accountability throughout the whole organization, which is sometimes what's missing or lacking in an entrepreneurial organization. And there's a long-term perspective component to the whole thing. So engagement is typically 2 years with our clients, some longer, some shorter, some forever. But that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Yeah, and I appreciate your explanation there. I think the word that stuck out to me as you described it was the word simple. It sounds like there's a very specific way of going about it, and the goal is to really create that simplicity through that process.
Yeah, literally. I mean, what I also love, it is simple and it's industry agnostic, so anyone can understand it and be taught the tools and use them to do, to get more of what they want is really what we like to say.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. Kate, same question for you in terms of core philosophy or approach to 7 stages of growth.
Sure. So the 7 stages of growth is a proven model that is based on research of over 650 companies across 35 industries. And what it identifies is that there are 7 distinct stages of growth that companies from 1 to 500 go through. And complexity increases when you add people. That means the complexities and the rules of each stage of growth change. So the core philosophy is that creating and growing and sustaining a healthy, vibrant organization requires adhering to and understanding those rules so that you can adapt to the vagaries of change and make sure that you're doing the right things at the right time. And it's also a very predictive tool that lets you see around the corners to what's going to happen before it surfaces ahead of critical decision points.
That's good. And so it sounds like, as I heard you, it sounds like 7 stages of growth is almost directional in terms of a growth path for a business and informs what needs to be done.
Yes, and it also looks at how effective are you addressing the complexities that need to happen for your current stage of growth. And as you continue to grow. So growth might be defined differently by business owners. It might be adding people. It might be increasing revenues or increasing profitability, but it could also be revamping the strategy or developing leaders. It's very flexible in that I really like what Ben said earlier. It's about meeting the client where they are.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah, I want to move to the next question. I'm gonna stack 2 questions together. Those of you that are coaches know I'm not supposed to do this, but I'm gonna do it anyways. I think we can keep up right now. So the first question I want to ask though is if there's a particular industry or size of business that your particular, whether it be framework or system, works with, and those of you that also work with clients, and I think each person here does in some capacity. Feel free to call out Bill just like you did if there's any particular industry or size that you in particular work with. So if you kind of give us both of those pictures, both for the system or the framework, as well as you as an individual. But the other question, so that's really A and B, that's one. But the other question is, how do you measure success for your clients? So who are those clients and how do you measure success for those clients, if you don't mind? Bill, would love if you can kind of lead off from us and then we'll go from there.
Sure, I'm happy to. So look, there's 300 coaches and we all have roughly, and we have some parameters on how to choose. And I think some of the coaches would answer this a little bit differently. But you asked, first of all, about industry and about size. Let me say, probably for most of us, we don't specialize in industry. And in fact, we think that when somebody calls up saying, hey, I'm looking for a real estate coach, or I'm looking for a whatever, general construction coach, like, we think that's a big mistake. You're going to get the same ideas that everybody else gets if you hire a coach in your industry that specializes. If you hire the dental coach, right, you're going to get the ideas that are well known. But I'm working with a biotech company a couple of years ago, and they're going through this thing. They're actually opening clinics to do their. I'm speaking about it obliquely because I don't want to disclose all the details.
Yeah.
Of them, but
do tell.
Right. So they're doing this thing, and they're having some operational issues with their flow of taking care of the patients. And I'm like, that seems really crazy to me. Let me tell you about what happens when I get my hair cut. And I talk about how after I finish the haircut, the one who cuts my hair schedules me for 5 to 6 weeks out at her prompting, right? Like, why don't you do that? And they're like, oh, well, we have to run tests. We don't know if people are suitable to continue in this protocol, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, so you're screwing up 70% of your people because 30% don't continue? That's insanity. Like, test it, try it. So they did, right? That's applying an idea of hair care or some other service, right? Hospitality to healthcare. Totally different. So our biggest breakthroughs happen when we do things differently, out of the box, not the way that, and when I think about my own work as CEO and all the work with our clients, it's the non-industry. Like, there's plenty of industry experts. We try to get outside and go abroad. Now, because I'm Silicon Valley, San Francisco, I've done a lot of funded tech companies, but those aren't the only billion-dollar companies that I've done. They've come from all sorts of places. So drawing broadly. So first, industry, no. Most of us aren't industry specific. The second thing is that about size. I would say some of us are like, oh, I work from companies from 10 plus million or that kind of thing. And there are a few that'll do like 1 to 20. I have learned not to pay any attention at all to size. By size, we vary the engagement and the approach, but I'm really focused on goals. So you want to be number one in the world, you want to be $1 billion, you want to be 100 million, something really significant, I'm interested. You want to double your business or just get a little more time back, that's fine. There's other coaches here who have simpler systems, maybe less expensive than working with us, but you really want to go big, that's interesting.
Yeah. So it sounds like industry agnostic, and then in terms of the work that you focus on, interesting is someone that wants to go big. And then it sounded like, if I picked up on it and recognizing it, there are some scaling up coaches that may work with companies that are maybe kind of downstream.
Like, I know a guy who does a lot of restoration companies in our world. I know another number of coaches who just work with particular, who tend to be 10 million plus, who won't touch. But I did one company that started at 3 million and 12 people, and they're now worldwide the number one leader in their category in over 400. Like, I love that game. So I would have, somebody might have ruled them out because they weren't big enough yet. Oh, talk to me when you're, a little further along. Yeah, no, I'm taking them.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And for those of you that are listening or watching right now, I think this is where you're going to pick up on some pretty big differences, even between the different coaches and between the different systems or frameworks. And really, that was the goal of creating this conversation, is to get an understanding of what's available and what's out there for you. I'm going to jump. I'll go Benj, I'm going to go to you. Kate, then I'm going to go to you. And then Rebecca, I'm going to go to you. So same question. We're talking about industry. And we're talking about size of business, and then also how you measure success for your clients.
Yeah. Bill, did you want to answer the how you measure success part?
Well, there are a few things. So we're looking at growth, but we're looking like the top line, but that's not the most useful thing. Is really company growth, like value growth. And so when I think about a company that gets to $1 billion in revenue, I can actually get to $1 billion value faster than $1 billion in revenue. And if we don't have profitability and cash building in the business, then just getting a lot of top line growth isn't really helping anything. So we want to address all of those things. We want a company well aligned, clear accountability, all that kind of thing. So, but probably the biggest driver is company value.
Yep. Okay. No, good feedback. Benj, how about you?
Yeah. So Industry, we are also agnostic. We do have some coaches, so we do not have 300. We have 42 coaches across the United States and a lone soul in Germany. And we are some of them are industry specific. So we've got one that only does RIAs, a construction guy, a nonprofit, somebody that only does churches. We are all over the place, but most of our coaches will serve about anybody. And most of us look for companies that are in the 25 to 250 employee mark. Revenue is a weird number because what revenue equals in different industries is very different. And so the complexity happens with people. So we look for that. Under that 25 is an engagement possible. Yes, we might push you to more of like one-to-one coaching. Then what we typically do is work with a senior leadership team directly as a team. And if they're above 250, we'll see if we can help them. A lot of times it's the same problem with bigger zeros. So it fits, and every once in a while there is a point where I think they do mature past us. So we'd have that conversation. In terms of how I measure success, a lot of times it is if the CEO and COO are sleeping well at night. If they're sleeping, then I know that we're doing a great job. Measuring success for us, very different than Bill. I want to know what that CEO's measure of success is, because sometimes it is margin. Sometimes for him in his life, being home more, being present more. It may be something in terms of the culture that they're creating. Nobody sets out to start a shitty company, but a lot of them end up that way, right? So how can we regain that and put the joy back in their life and in their work? It might be that they're doing all this work and there's not any money dropping to the bottom line. It could be growth. Success looks a lot of different ways, and it really depends on what they're looking for out of the engagement. So again, we're going to meet them where they are and have those conversations. And then how we're testing that, I'm constantly not just asking that, pre and post sessions with either the operator or the owner, but also the minute we come in the morning with the leadership team, I'm like, hey, where are you guys at right now? Like, what is your emotional state today? And it could be because your cat threw up on your bed in the middle of the night. Like, we're humans and that stuff happens. It could be something in the business that's awful. It could be going great. So like that. And then at the end of the day, asking the same questions, like, how are you feeling leaving? Like, if we had 7 hours together, are you feeling invigorated or are you feeling demoralized, right? And just that emotional temperature in the room can be a great measure of how we're doing impacting that business.
Yeah. So you, on the size, you use headcount is really the gauge, 25 to 250, probably loose on the fringes, but that's where you serve companies the
100%.
best.
Yeah.
And then industry, you mentioned it's kind of a mix. You have some people that are more focused on a particular area, and you have some that aren't as well.
Yeah. I'm like Bill. I love taking something from one industry and applying, like, that's magic to me. So you can't lock me into a niche, but some of our coaches, they have that expertise that they want to bring to their industry, which is awesome.
Yep. And the other thing, which I think you called out, is your measure of success is the leaders, whether it be CEO or COO, whatever it is, it's their measure of success. So you identify what that is, and that's really what you're hopefully driving after or moving towards.
Absolutely.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. Kate, same question for you. I think this is a good opportunity for everybody that's listening to kind of hear from each person here what this looks like and sounds like. So if you have an organization, you can maybe picture, how does this fit for me? Based off of whatever industry you are in or whatever your headcount is as well. So Kate, industries for 7 stages of growth, and what's the measure of success?
Sure. So the 7 stages of growth is highly adaptable across different industries. And, like Benj, we're focused on the number of employees. So the SBA defines small business as 500 or fewer employees. And the research that was conducted was specific to what are successful entrepreneurial businesses going through. There's a lot of literature out there on behemoth organizations, but really what makes successful entrepreneurial businesses as they're going through their growth stages. And so using the SBA definition of 500 or fewer. That said, my personal preference is working with about 20 to 250 employees as well. That's kind of my sweet spot. And as far as measuring success, I mean, the short answer is we're focused on results, right? Did they achieve what we set out to do at the beginning of our working together? But most specifically, at the beginning of an engagement, we do a really thorough discovery, deep dive of the specific issues based on stage of growth specific assessments to not only deal with the apparent issues, but drill down to the root cause. What's really going on under the surface? We call these hidden agents. There are 8 hidden agents in the stages of growth model. And so the work that we're doing as we're going through, as we're debriefing on the assessments, culminates in the leadership team aligning, buying into 5 to 8 primary initiatives for the next 9 to 12 months. And we put robust action plans in those. And then we meet with the CEO and their leadership team every single month to create that rhythm and the discipline of executing on those initiatives and keep tracking them and moving them forward. And then at the end of 9 or 12 months, I say 9 or 12 because it just depends on what's going on in the organization, we do a rerun of those assessments to determine where there have been improvements or where there are still some considerable gaps. So one client, for example, increased performance by 33%, another increased performance on their initiatives by 40% in just 9 months. So that's how we measure primarily, is the progress against those. And then also other goals that the CEO and his or her leadership team put out at the beginning, more of the soft skill goals. We work with that too as we're coaching the individuals on the team.
Yeah, so that sounds, not that the other systems or frameworks don't have an assessment, it just wasn't part of the conversation up to this point. So that sounds almost unique to where measure of success, you mentioned, yes, it's results, but you have an assessment-based process where you're kind of rinsing and repeating to see, did the needle move in the areas that the business was intending it to move?
Yes, and also if they are in growth mode and they're going to add enough people to bump into another stage of growth, we want to prepare them for that so that they're beginning to address those root cause issues before they hit that new stage of growth.
Okay, no, I appreciate you sharing that. Rebecca, last, of course, not least on this question, I just think this is such a good question for people to understand each approach, but same question for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have industry flexibility as well. Our almost 900 implementers across the globe, we don't have, specific types of businesses that we work with. However, like Benj, we have people with specific interests. So as a family-owned business, I tend to attract that. I love to work with families, husbands, wives. I think 90% of my clients are family owned. So that is kind of my niche. I'm not intentionally, but I do love it. And so size. So I do have one client that started out with one person. He was the visionary. He was the only person on the leadership team, and it worked. We had his focus day was just with me. And then over the course of the next 90 days, he increased his leadership team number to 4. So we can work with smaller, we can work with larger. 10 to 250 is our sweet spot. And yet, like some of the others have said, it does work for larger organizations as well. And our revenue isn't really as important either. To be able to afford an implementer, you need to be in the 2 million-ish range, typically. So that's kind of what I look for. There's a lot of flexibility with who we work with. And then the measuring of results, like I feel like this is real similar to some of the things that have been said. So they needed to figure out what they want out of their businesses and what the pain points are and what they need help with. And so we do help them solve their issues at the root cause. So they're not talking about those every single week and in every meeting. We help improve alignment and focus. So that tends to drive the discipline, accountability, helps with profitability. Everyone rowing in the same direction. And then decision making, sometimes there's not clarity around that. And so we can help them get real clear on the structure. And we call most of that is done in the accountability chart. So everyone has their 5, major roles and responsibilities. So there's real clarity throughout the whole organization. The consistent execution. So we work with them on a 90-day cadence. Once their first 90 days are behind them, then we just come in and work with them on their quarterlies and annuals. And we measure progress along the way so they know where they've been. Then they come up for air and figure out where they're going next. And so that's how that works.
Yeah. So it sounds like on the size of the relationship to some of the others here, where headcount seems to be the driver, and for you, if I heard you right, 10 to 250 is kind of that sweet spot then.
Yep, absolutely.
Great. I appreciate you sharing that. I wanted to move to a question for each of you to kind of tap into some of the experience that you've had and to give you an opportunity to talk through whether it be an interesting client experience or an example of a client who experienced a significant change with your system or framework. But just again, whether someone's here listening or watching now, or potentially looking at the recording or maybe a clip coming out of this, help us understand, what is it that you do? What is it that your system framework, or you even as a coach or whatever you refer to yourself as, what is it that you do with clients? And can you give us an example from a client experience? I guess, Rebecca, I'm going to start off with you. From Rebecca, Benj, I'm going to go to you, and then Bill will go to you, and then Kate, I'll let you bring us home on the same question. I think this will let people listening or watching kind of picture what this might be like for them, hopefully.
Yeah, so we're not consultants. So we teach, we facilitate, and we coach. And we say that all entrepreneurs need a peer group. So Vistage and EO, something along those lines. They need a coach, which we are. And then they also need an operating system, which is what EOS is as well. So like a gym membership, if you're not using the gym, you're not going to get results. And some unique situations. I'm my own company. We are a janitorial business, 30 years old this November. And during COVID, we increased our bottom line by $1 million. And that was the first time we'd had a profit in years. And it was due to, the leadership team will tell you this, but I was witness to it. It was because of the tools and the EOS process. We started getting the right people in the right seats. Our core values came into place. We created a really amazing culture. And so that was pretty exciting for me, because we'd had just the ups and downs, and the all-arounds were just painful. And then the client that I spoke about earlier, who started with one, he's doubled his business every 2 years over the last 4 years. So he started with the one. He's a survey company and has now 12 pilots, and just purchased his 8th plane. And so he's realized the revenue benefits and excitement around, just creating a really solid company that started from, literally nothing. So, the tools work if you're using the system purely. That's just my best advice, because it works.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. So sharing both the personal experience of you using EOS within your own business and seeing the impact that it had, and your leadership team being able to experience the impact, and then giving us that example of that survey company. And that was your example earlier, like you mentioned, where it was on the smaller side. It didn't necessarily fit right in within that target mix, but they're on a growth path using the system itself.
Yeah.
Okay, I appreciate you sharing that. I admittedly forget who was next, so whoever goes on the screen, you're next. Benj, you're up.
Yeah, this is a fun question, and my client Jason came to mind when I started working with him. They were, I think, 60 people, so they were hitting kind of a new level of complexity. And I didn't learn this till way later. We were doing kind of some interviews on like, what was the value of working with System and Soul and Benj. And one of the things that he said shocked me. He said accountability. And I was like, accountability? I'm like the last guy that's going to hold you accountable. Like, that's just not my wiring. But they said, knowing that somebody from the outside was going to come in and ask us how we're doing, did we do what we said we were going to do, just drove a lot of action that otherwise wouldn't have happened. And I love the phrase, you can't read the label from inside the jar. And when you are in the business, you are inside the jar, and it's so hard to see what's going on without being biased. So the story that came to mind with Jason, I'll change some names to protect the innocent, but we've been working together 2.5 years. They'd made a ton of progress, but there was still this dotted line off of his name on the org chart, and we'll call him Sam, was there. And everything else in the business, like, it was beautiful, it was structured. They had gone from a train wreck of a culture to one of the most impressive, like, they go on tour now teaching companies how to build the culture that they have. So amazing transformation. They had a 9-figure exit last year, and we were in the room and talking through this, and I was just kind of like, okay, so one more thing. Why is Sam still up here? And Jason, the CEO, started talking. He's like, well, he was one of the first employees, and I don't know how he'd feel working for somebody else, or if he felt like it was a demotion, whatever. I was like, okay, cool. So just to be clear, let me make sure I understand this. Sam's emotions are running the company. He goes, shit, Benj. Like, it was one of those moments that he knew that, right? But it took somebody else to kind of call that out in the room with the most loving way, but and allowing them to choose how they dealt with it. They were really wise in how they chose to deal with it that day. I was really impressed with that as well. So I think just that idea that we all need somebody that isn't tied to the results, isn't tied to the work. Like,
Yeah.
You want to go set objectives or OKRs for the quarter. Like, if I'm the one assigning them, I'm going to go light because I'm not the one that I don't want to do all the work. But if I'm, challenging the room, like, hey, can we do a little more than this? Is this enough? How can we involve our team? What resources do we have to get this done? We might be able to pull off more than we think. Even asking the question, okay, this is 90 days, but could we do it in 45? What would that look like? Having some of those conversations to challenge the room.
Yeah, so good example. And coming out of that example, just hearing from what you're saying, the ability for you to be able to, and someone from System and Soul, to be that outside voice, to be able to challenge the group or call the things out that maybe a group is biased and really not considering in the process because they're in the middle of it, they're inside the jar.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I believe, who's up? So
Bill.
Bill.
Yeah, let me answer a little bit differently. As people share their examples and tools, and I'm like, I think we all do a lot of the same things, and yet I'm also certain that working with all of us would be a really different experience. So, many of us do quarterly planning days and annual strategy sessions, and we do foundational things to lay in the baseline of stuff. And we coach CEOs and we deal with their psychology, and we look at the dynamics and we create accountability, and we use assessments, and, we have all these kinds of things. So I think there are differences in, for sure, there's subtle differences in the style of our framework, but Vern created Scaling Up and the Rockefeller Habits that came before it, reading and learning from professors, CEOs, and others that came before. Gina Wickman, who created the EOS thing, was one of Vern's early coaches. And I regularly deal with people who are ready to graduate from EOS, who want bigger company stuff and more expanded kind of tool set. We're all very related, and you could probably work. You're going to see differences in some of the tools and the emphasis, and you're going to see big differences in the coaches. So among our 300, among your 900 or whatever, each of us, like somebody who comes from a financial background is going to lean in on the numbers. Somebody who comes from a people background is going to focus more on the people and the team dynamic and the psychology of the thing. Somebody who's a strategist is going to have, like, each of us has a little bit of that, and we're going to have that. So I'll just say a little bit about mine. I do startup kinds of work, like getting strategy clear, getting the team clear and aligned, and the clear accountabilities, that kind of thing, as a kind of an opening baseline in almost every. We have an engagement program for companies between 10 and 100 people, between 1 and 20 million, right? You just have to get that far, but be growth oriented. And then we have another kind of approach that we do for companies 20 million plus or over 100 people. but the lines are gray. Like, it's not an absolute thing. If you have this count, it's like this, or if you have this revenue number, it might feel different. I've had small companies with big funding and big growth imperatives, like go all in and, do it a different way than somebody whose goals are more modest. So I would say there's probably big differences on the style, the personality, the kind of focus of the person. I tend to do a lot of like getting the baseline of the people and the strategy work clear in the beginning, and then we upgrade the strategy over time. And then I tend to lead quarterly planning updates for the team, and I sequence in different things depending on what the company needs. So if you're having trouble attracting, retaining people, I'm going to use assessments and interviews and things like that to figure out, is it a strategy problem, or is it a culture problem, or is it something about your recruitment or HR policies? We're going to figure out and then train you on those specific things. So the things that we add in each quarter or annually or whenever we add them in are based on the specific company challenges that you're dealing with at the time. And I would say that's probably true for most of us, just that we would approach it from different places. And I've had people who come to work with me who are like, I have a lot of visibility and I do a show and that kind of thing. And I've, like this, it presents well. So I had people choose me for that and then been like, oh, you're really uncomfortable for us. You're off-putting. I'm like, that's fine. I'm going to suggest a couple of other coaches that you might like better. I totally get it. I'm not for everyone. It's fine. I think I swore too many times in their first session, right? And it was uncomfortable for them. I'm just like unrestrained and going for it. So I recommended 2 other coaches in our world, and they ended up working with one of them who was a lot more polite and nicer and less direct than me. I like to figure out that fit both to the system as well as the coach who's got your vibe. At the same time, like I had people who are a little buttoned up and a little constrained. They're like, oh, Bill, we like it. You're fluid and you're out there and you're kind of creative. And we want to bring more of that into our company, right? So it's figuring out how much you want somebody to push you, how much you can lean into what their message is and their own kind of flavor style.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you coloring outside the lines on that and also kind of bringing everything together. And it sounds like your client example was the client that you ended up referring to someone else. So
I have dozens of clients. I can talk about the one that went from less than 2 dozen people to 400 and number one in the world in their category, and talked about the companies that went to $1 billion. I would say the vast majority of them aren't clear cut. They're all not total successes. There's always like a little this or that. And like a company that got to $1 billion value, but the CEO kept trying to be CEO and Superman. And so he'd like text and email people at 3 a.m. and tell them to have something ready by the 9 a.m. They'd wake up at 6 and their day started with their hair on fire. Like I can think of or another company that sold for $1 billion, but really wanted 6, right? So is that a success? I don't know. Like people think it's cool. I've coached companies past $1 billion value, but life is complicated and nuanced and that kind of thing. We want people to take ground, and I've now 11 years coaching full time. I've worked with thousands of companies. I had been CEO and partner in like 6 companies across different industries before. I need a little more. I can't just share one story.
Got it. No, I appreciate what you did share, though, and I think that gives us a little bit more of a snapshot of your world as well. Rebecca, I believe you were next, and I think you're next because I actually have a prompt next to me now that figured out how to help me remember. I guess Kate's next. Just kidding.
Just kidding. I think I'm the last one of this question. And I just want to say, Bill, I really appreciate your directness and your candidness. It's very refreshing. And what I like about it, it's true that there is a lot of overlap in everything that we do. It's really about how well do you think you can work with the client and helping them get to that place to where they're really having the conversation to make sure that they're hiring the right person and the right solution. So I just want to say right up front, to piggyback on what you said, Bill, I don't sell the stages of growth. It is primarily what I use with my clients because I am focused on rapid growing entrepreneurial businesses, and that seems to be the best fit. That said, there are a lot of other things that weave in. When you're working with a client for a year, 2 years, 3 years, you've got to meet them where they are and adapt to that. So we're doing the measurements along the way of, are they addressing the challenges specific to their growth stage and getting ready for the next one, and also what else do they need in the organization operationally or around leadership development or whatever it is. So I really want to piggyback on what you said, and I really appreciate your directness about that. That said, my clients do typically hire me to help them identify and anticipate and navigate the predictable challenges of growth around in operations and leadership and strategy. And one of my clients, so yes, we are industry agnostic indeed. And I just happen to attract mostly manufacturing and construction and engineers and scientists. And so one of my clients that I've been working with for 3.5 years, they were in the additive materials industry, which is really cool. It was an emerging industry when I started working for them. It's becoming really popular, and they mix metal alloy powders for 3D printing for really cool stuff like F1 racing engines and space rockets and things like that. Anyway, when I worked with them, they had grown from 18 to 50 employees. Now that is a 528% increase in the direct communication channels. And there's a formula for that. You can figure out what that means. So that really, Beck, and that really supports the changes that go on as you add people. Well, anyway, he was a young CEO. He was the brainchild of this organization he started. And he was struggling with the expansion and the, shall I say, the unglamorous side of entrepreneurship, which is sometimes feeling lost and a little bit stuck and certainly overwhelmed. So he hired me, and I was working with his leadership team. And what became immediately clear to them is that what worked to get the business from 18 employees wasn't going to work anymore. And many of the managers who had started working with him from day one, the company simply outgrew him, and he needed to bring in really seasoned managers. Also, getting to 50 employees, you've got to have a lot of sales. You've got to be able to fuel and support that increase in employees. So long story short is he finally adapted to the business needs. They simplified operations, they optimized their resources, they maximize opportunities, and now they are in negotiations for acquisition. So that was a pretty cool thing to actually prepare them to get to that place.
Yeah, it sounds like a really nice success story, not just for the work that you did, but for them choosing to bring someone in from the outside and help them navigate what they were navigating.
Mm-hmm.
It's great. So what I want to do, I'm going to get us to the point where we're all going to wrap up together. Really appreciate each one of you as panelists for joining in. I know that your time is valuable. You have a lot of other things that you could be doing, and hopes that those of you that are listening, watching, whether it be now or the recording, that you found this valuable. And in some way, shape, or form, if you don't already have somebody engage with you, that you'll consider one of these individuals or one of these systems or frameworks as an option. To wrap us up, I'm going to go in order on my screen so I don't forget this time: Kate, Benj, Bill, and then Rebecca. And really, if you could give us kind of that snapshot of what piece of advice would you give to business owners who are considering using a business coach or framework or a system, what advice would you give them? And then also, as you do that, just let us know how people can get a hold of you, or if you're not the right person, how they can get a hold of someone. Let's go ahead, Kate, if you'd start, and let's just kind of roll through from there. Thank you.
Sure. So the advice I would give would be twofold. Number one is have an in-depth discovery conversation with the consultant or the coach that you're considering. We really need to understand your business situation and the impact on the business. Where are you feeling the pain points in the organization? What are your objectives? Where do you really want to take this organization? Like I said earlier, I don't sell the stages of growth. My discovery sessions start with a 30-minute introduction, get to know each other. What are your top level challenges? And then we decide together if we want to go further. If we do, that is an in-depth discussion, no charge. That is an in-depth discovery session for an hour and a half to 2 hours. I really want to understand their situation. And then I will fashion a recommendation. Might be the stages of growth, might be a referral to someone else who can better support them. That's the first piece, is just make sure that you really vet whoever you're considering working with and that they really understand what you're dealing with. And the second thing is, how do you feel about them? Do you think that you can work well together? So, I ask a series of questions to uncover all of that, because I don't want to make any assumptions of what the right answer is. So, what's their style? Can you work with them? And so what is it? How can you reach me? Was that the other one?
Yeah. What's the best way for somebody to get a hold of you?
Sure. So you can reach me, Kate, Kate, at missioncriticalteams.com. My website is missioncriticalteams.com. Also, LinkedIn is Kate Ripp. And I think that's it. Right, Eric?
Yep, you got it. Thank you. Thank you very much. Ben, you're up.
If you're on the edge, I think the biggest thing is to pull the trigger in one direction or another. And there are differences, but I will tell you, I know scaling up really well. I know EOS really well. I do not know 7 stages of growth really well. Super intrigued by it, Kate. But I know what I do know is that any of these will serve your business well if you're not using something from people that have gone ahead of you, taken best practices and packaged them up so you don't have to learn the hard way. I wish somebody would have introduced it to me 10 years earlier than they did. And so I really, would encourage, and somebody said when I first took the leap of faith, somebody's like, you can't afford not to do it. And they were so right. So right. There's a lot of, the space that we create in a session room is sacred. The second thing is the coach that's bringing whatever framework or operating system is really important. You've got to be a good match with them. The third thing, which is the framework or operating system. So you need to choose it wisely, but also realize that it is the third thing, I think, in the hierarchy of what you're getting and the value you're getting. And when it comes to how would you choose, when we talk about system and soul, 2 things. Just if you resonate with this idea that you want to put the emphasis on the people and the dignity and the culture that you create, the identity of the organization, we're probably a good fit if you resonate with that. But also with a system and soul, you can try before you buy. We'll come in. We don't do sales meetings. We don't do, spend a lot of time in diagnostics and conversations. We get in there. We do what's called a strategy sprint. We're going to sit with your leadership team and help you prioritize the 3 most important things for you to focus on, and give you some tools for how to get those done. And after that, we'll have a follow-up call. If you want to engage with us, then it's welcome and never expected. Systemandsoul.com. You can find me. You can find all of our coaches. We all offer free strategy sprint.
Great. Yeah. Thank you for that. And Bill, how about you?
Yeah. So I like the comments about finding the fit and kind of trusting your instincts around who you can work with and who's going to push you in a good way and like that. And I think we'll all have slightly different approaches. So figuring out, but here's the thing I think that we haven't talked about and most of us are missing in the people we work with. I think as you're growing and selling the company, you want to create a big goal and be working towards that. But you want to create today a plan to sell and exit the business. Too many people are waiting for someday to get out of their business. They're like, oh, I'm young now. I'm just going to grow this for a while. And the problem is, if you take that approach, someday never really comes. And when someday comes, you're too tired or the business problems are too big. And now your business is worth less or worthless. So if you don't think today about growing and exiting your business on the way up, you'll wait till you try to time it on the plateau or whatever. Nobody wants to buy your business at that point. You can't sell it. You don't have the emotional energy anymore. So think now about getting out and use the coach and the coaching and the framework or whatever to get out of your job in running that business and move on to the next business, the next chapter in life, minority ownership, a board position, but like work yourself out of a job as quickly as possible and get out of like, I think I've done that well and poorly. I've seen my clients do that fantastically and tragically, and left millions of dollars on the table. And then I think about the ones who really thought about it, who anticipated in advance selling, exiting the business, and they sold before it was too late on the way up. And then I think about times I missed where I could have sold some or all of the company. So anyway, I think the biggest thing that we miss is creating our exit plan today and then working toward it. It might change, but start to think about it now. It's easy to reach me. I'm scalingcoach.com. You can find me there. And if I'm not the guy, there's others in my world. I'll refer you to somebody.
Yep. No, great advice. And thanks for sharing all of that. And Rebecca, if you want to go ahead and round us out as well, same question. And how can we get a hold of you?
Yeah. I appreciate what you just said, Bill. It's really, very pertinent. I feel like planning and just, seeing, looking ahead versus in the now. And so that said, having right fit clients is really key to getting this good work done, and having clear expectations from the very beginning is how that works. And we do a free 90-minute meeting to discover who we are, what we want. They can, obviously find out more about me and about EOS. And then I show them how we work with our clients with the tools and then the process. So there's a clear understanding from the very beginning. And then we have a guarantee, which I love because it just keeps me on my toes. They know they're getting, pure me, honest, open, etc. But if you don't get value from our sessions, then you don't pay me. And so I feel like that goes a long way in creating trust and just finding those right people who are ready to make the move and who want to get better at what they do and get more from their businesses, things that they don't have currently. Just prioritizing through this change management process, but also getting peer support, getting buy-in from the team. That's all really key to having this whole thing work. And so that's my 2 cents. And you can reach me. My email address is Rebecca with 2 C's, .Finken, my last name, at eosworldwide.com. And then you can go to eosworldwide.com/Rebecca-Finken, or you can search location. So I work in Las Vegas, Nevada, as well as Arizona. So I'm in 2 markets, so you could search me that way at eosworldwide.com.
Great. Yeah, thank you for that. And thank you again for each of you joining the panel. Like I said, I know your time is valuable, and I really hope that the time that you invested in this was well spent for any business owner or business leader that's really trying to determine where to go from here, whether it be exit or whether it be them in their current challenges and how they get through those challenges and can start to think and dream bigger. Thank you all for joining. For anybody that's listening or watching, you now know how to get a hold of everybody here. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me or to Jordan or to Mark. We're happy to point you in the right direction with each person on the panel as well. Thank you all and have a good evening.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.